From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I am your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun, my co-pilot, as he's been the last couple of weeks, Andre Johnson Jr. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for all that fire content that we bring to you 3 times a week. It is Monday, fresh off the weekend, so we've got another great episode to get to today of the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. Before we do that, let me welcome you in, Andre Johnson. How was your weekend? What is going on?
Man, Sean, we talked about working out last week. Now I'm on meal plans. I'm eating healthy, and let me tell you, I have never wanted a hamburger more, fried chicken more, all this grilled and baked foods. It's good, but man, it's a struggle.
It's a transition. There's no doubt about that. Come to think of it, I have started a new workout plan myself. I felt like I was cruising a little too easy, so I had to shake it up a little bit, and this is normally the time I do that in my workout sort of calendar, if you will, when we start that March. Because it's hard to get New Year's resolution going because New Year's don't really start New Year's for us, especially football season. Then we got Mardi Gras, so March is generally a good time of year. Speaking of March, it's early March. The Combine has come and gone, where we saw a lot of draft prospects. And I can get into individual prospects today. But big picture, we have an interesting topic that we wanted to talk about because it's starting to make its way into this space, the podcast space, and which means it's going to get into the main space shortly as well. I wanted to wait a little bit later to get to it, but since it's already here, kind of at the table, we might as well address it. So, what will be our podcast topic, our big picture topic today?
Today, the big picture. We know the Saints are sitting at 14th right now in the first round in the NFL draft. If you are in that Saints war room, would you be comfortable with trading back in the draft?
All right. So we're going to go here today, and we're going to go with the disclaimer, provide the disclaimer that we understand. Right. We know that the Saints never do this.
Right. We've seen them trade up
ever do. They trade up almost every draft, but they have never traded down, not since 2006 or 7, I believe, was the last time that they traded back. So we all understand that the likelihood of this happening is slim. But the question is, should they consider trading back in the draft? And I believe, first of all, if you look at the Saints' projected picks, now it's important to point out the compensatory picks are not official yet. This is all projected picks. Right. It's a really weird board for the Saints. It's a very weird board for the Saints. It's 14th overall pick in round 1, 45 in round 2. Then you jump all the way to round 5, where you have 3 compensatory picks projected, plus your regular 5th-round pick. So 149, 167, 174. That's a 100-pick gap between rounds 2 and rounds 5, and then round 6, 201 from Philly, and then round 7, 230. So it actually makes some sense, given the hole in your board, to consider trading back if you're the New Orleans Saints, because honestly, you like your picks at 1 and 2, but you have that massive gap there, and if you're the Saints, trading back has to be on the table, because if you look at the way they've kind of addressed the idea of tweaking things or being willing to try new things and being willing to change new things, this certainly makes a lot of sense to me, because you need as many young, quality, inexpensive football players on your roster. And the best way to get them is by getting those guys via the NFL draft. That checks all the boxes: young, quality, and inexpensive. And you only have 2 picks right now in the top 148 picks. That is certainly not a lot. If you want to replicate the 2017 class, which is the class everyone points to in terms of recharging, resetting, and recalibrating this franchise, first and foremost, the draft class was phenomenal because the scouting was dead on. Your first 6 picks were all 6 hits. Not kind of good, not pretty good. They were all hits, from Lattimore to Ramczyk to Marcus Williams to Alvin Kamara to Alex Anzalone to Trey Hendrickson. 6 for 6 is incredibly hard to do. The scouting was phenomenal, but you know what they all had in common?
What did they all have in
common? They
common?
were all picked within the first 103 selections of the draft. 2 first-rounders, 1 second rounder, and 3 third rounders. So to me, you want to replicate that draft class. Well, try to get as many picks in that top 100, top 150 to get yourself and give yourself the best chance of having that quality. And look, I know the Saints don't do it, and the more likely option is when you get to that hole, look to future draft picks to trade back in. That's probably the direction they would take. But if you were the Saints and you all of a sudden got an offer, and I've been doing these drafts, I'm sure you've been doing them too, those mock draft simulator things, and I've got a couple of offers, and I'm thinking of, okay, if Pittsburgh calls me at 20 and I get the 20th and the 51st pick to go back to 20 and I get 51, it means I got 45, 51, and 20 as opposed to 14 and 45. Yeah, I'm starting to consider that if I'm the Saints. And again, if you are open to change and kind of opening your mind a little bit, which they've shown they've done a little bit with the complete 180 when it comes, not 180, but the complete change, the overhaul of the offensive staff.
Right.
I think it's something they should consider given where you're picking in the draft, what you need. And there's the other factor. The draft lines up pretty good depth-wise, prospect-wise, with what you need in terms of a tackle. It's the second deepest class in the second deepest position group in this class. If you were in need of that and you move back a couple spots, you wouldn't necessarily be in danger of losing that if you were able to move back and get an extra pick in the process. So, yes, that's the long-winded answer to the question, should they consider it? Absolutely, they should consider it.
And the first thing I thought of was the last thing you just talked about. I'm looking at the draft board. I'm looking at the Saints sitting at 14. Now, if you talk about the 13 picks before the Saints, you're going to have 4 for sure, maybe 5, possibly even 6 quarterbacks.
Absolutely.
Go in that top 13. You're going to have at least 3 wide receivers, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, most likely Rome Odunze, probably in that top 13. So if I'm the Saints, it depends what I'm looking for. If you're looking for your biggest need, which we've talked about being offensive line and defensive line, tackle and defensive end to be specific, you can get talented guys at that position deeper than 14. If you were to drop to 17, 19, 21, 23, I think that they have guys in that range that you can get that will fill your need. Now, if you're trying to shock the world and maybe go something, I know fans, a lot of the fans, you guys love the skill position players, you guys love the corners, the receivers, the quarterbacks. If that's what you're trying to do, 14 might be a better place for that. If you're looking for a guy you've been very high on, Brock Bowers, maybe you try to stay at 14 and get that guy. But if you're locked in on what we believe to be their biggest need, which is offensive tackle and defensive end, you can trade back and still, I've got at least 5 guys on the list who will probably be there in, say, that 12 to 25 range who you can get and still, like you said, we talked about filling gaps in your team, fill gaps in your draft board, because from the second round all the way to the 5th round, that's a long time.
That's a long, long, long time to wait. And it's just, like I said before, it's an oddly constructed board. When you have 1, 2, and then no 3, no 4, was it 4 5th-round picks projected, a 6 or 2 6s and a 7, whatever it is. So, yeah, I think it's absolutely the year to consider it because, look, you've got to think quantity and quality here for the Saints. When you're in win-now mode, which they've always been, but when you had past teams that were kind of geared up to win, you knew they were a playoff team, and just 1 or 2 things to fill in the gap here and there to maybe help your team, you could be a little more aggressive with sacrificing a few more picks, not get quite the biggest draft class, to hone in on a few guys, get some quality guys, and if those guys work out, great. If they don't, great. But I think that has kind of caught up to them a little bit, and now you need both. You need quality and the quantity, and you can't just hope to land quality players on day 3. I think you need to add some more capital there in that middle of the draft. So I think, yes, absolutely. If the Saints get the offer, they should consider it. And, of course, a lot of factors play in. Who gets picked, there's always a couple surprises. They're going to have their board, and they're going to have their projections. So whatever their board comes up, whenever their pick comes up, who's available on their board, depending on how far back they can go, if they have a good chance of getting a few of those prospects, will clearly make a difference. But if we're talking about the big umbrella theme of tweaking what we've done, that's something that should be on the table.
You mentioned factors right there, and one of the biggest factors to consider is going to be, hypothetically, if you are trading back, where that offer is coming from. So if you're the Saints, you are in this scenario thinking about trading back. How far back would you be comfortable going in the first round?
This is fantastic. This is fantastic because I got lost in this mock draft thing because you could do it with the trades now. So I just started to kick around a few things just to do it. And I started doing them just to see what the offer I would get. Now, I got this Godfather offer right away where if you got this offer, this is never going to happen. But if you got this offer in a real draft that you do cartwheels to the draft table and accept, it was a 17th selection from Jacksonville to go up to 14, and you get their second, their third, and their fourth round to go along with that. Goodness,
take it.
I would swim to the draft, to get that deal. That's obviously not going to happen. But the farthest I would go to realistically land a quality football player, and remember this, there are 32 first-round picks, but they're not always 32 first-round graded prospects. Right. So if you start dipping further and further back, then I think it gets a little bit risky. So to me, I kind of earmarked or kind of drew a line. 21 or 22 would probably be the farthest back. That's Miami at 21, Philadelphia at 22 for right now. Obviously, you have a draft history of trades with Philadelphia, and that matters. You got to have a decent partner to go with. So if Philadelphia wanted to go from 22 to 14 and they offered you the 53rd overall selection, that could match up. And this is the points chart that I go by this time of year. That could potentially be enough to go up. Miami at 21, if they offered their second-round pick as well, which would be at 55, 21 and 55 to go up to 14. Maybe that's enough. Maybe you throw something in on the back end for a sweetener there just to make the deal work. But 21 or 22 would probably be the farthest I would go because I think when you get out of that range, you run the risk of running out of first-round prospects, and you still want to make sure you get a first-round graded prospect in the first round, especially when you start your day at 14. The other thing is this. You could trade down early, but trade up late. You would have enough in that fifth round. Do you really need 4 fifth-round picks? If you were able to exchange 2 to go up, maybe sneak into the back end of the fourth round, you could still do that. The Saints have been masterful at doing that in years past, moving up on day 3 to get certain players. You can package a high 5 and your 6 to go up a couple spots. Again, to sneak into the back of that fourth round or get into the middle of the fourth round or whatever combination. So just because you are considering trading down does not mean you can't trade back up at some point as well. So I think if you're the Saints, you got to have an open mind about this draft. You have a new OC that's going to have a new look on things when it comes to prospects. So I think all options would be the table. But the initial question to that answer, to me, I'm drawing the line at 22 because I think if you get out of 22, you're probably going to dip into second-round prospects, and I'm not sure if I want a second-round pick as my first-round pick.
Exactly, and that's kind of where I was thinking as well. I was thinking in that 23 to 24 range, so that's very close to 22. A question I would ask you, I think for the Saints, it kind of comes down to how much they maybe value those mid-round picks that you have or that you don't have if you're the Saints. Mm-hmm. If you're a team like, say, the Carolina Panthers, who does not have a first-round pick because they did that foolish trade to Chicago, let's say they're trying to get into the first round. Now, they will give you a haul of mid-round picks, maybe second, thirds, fourths, to get your first-round pick, but that means you have to move out of the first round to do it. Would a haul of mid-round picks in a draft like this maybe hold equal value to having that early pick but then not having the mid-round picks?
Possibly. Here's why. Because if I'm able to get Carolina's second-round pick, which is the first pick of the second round,
right,
and I already got 45, I can wheel my way back into the first round if I had to, and probably get into 23, 24 range. I might consider that. Carolina's probably the only team I would consider that for. Now, Carolina probably wouldn't do that because you just rarely see draft trades within your division. I guess it's possible. But, and you were able to get like their top third-round pick as well and their fourth-round pick, yeah, I would potentially consider that, especially when you consider you're trading back with the idea of possibly trading back forward. I'm just adding up the points here with that. So if the Saints at 45, 450, and 580, that's the Carolina value at 33. So what's that? That's about a little over 1,000. Yeah, that would get you right back to where you could start, probably around that 15 or 16 range, if that were indeed, if they go exactly by this, which they don't always do, but that just gives you an idea of where you could potentially end up getting into, certainly into the high teens, low 20s. So, Yeah, I would consider that. I don't know if that would scenario was a likely scenario to play itself out, but I would certainly consider that. I think the goal though for me is the top 150 of your prospects. If you can come away with 4 of the top 150, maybe 5.
Yep.
I think that would be extremely beneficial to this organization.
Absolutely, because I'm not even so much worried about what they do in the first round. I'm worried about what they can do in rounds 2 through 4. How they can wheel and deal to get back into that 3rd and 4th round, and how they can stack those picks, because you talked about the 2017 class, which is, I mean, if we're being frank, it's arguably the greatest or one of the greatest classes in recent history from an individual team based off of what they got from that. Not only did they hit early, they hit in the middle rounds too. So I really am excited to see what they'll get in the middle rounds. And like I said earlier, you're sitting at 14. You can either get maybe a guy who's valued to be a top 2, top 3 defensive end, offensive tackle, or you, depending on where you value a guy, you can trade back about 7, 8 picks, get your guy, and still start to stack the middle of that draft.
And again, let's reiterate. We don't think this is going to happen with the Saints. We don't think this is going to happen. Like history is the best indicator of what's going to happen, and obviously they've done things a certain way. But if there was ever a year where the circumstances lined up perfectly, you strongly consider it, given what you need, how your roster currently stacks up, where you're at as a franchise, and how your board currently stands, kind of sets up. This would be the year to strongly consider. There's something else I want to just briefly touch on. Yep. Remember this. That 2nd round pick is from Denver, okay? So whoever you get at 45, whoever that pick ends up being, add that to Brian Brzee. That's who you got for Sean Payton.
Right.
So I'm just that's something I'm going to kind of keep on the periphery. Just okay, who ended up being the players that ended up being the guys that ended up being the compensation for Sean Payton. So it's just something I've always thought about just when I watch all these trades and how they all sort of play itself out. But look, this is not the last time we're going to touch on this because there's going to be a lot of wheeling and dealing. There's going to be a lot of resetting after free agency, which is going to get really heated up here over the next couple days / weeks. It's about to be fun when it comes to the NFL offseason, and specifically when we're talking about the Saints free agency and the draft ahead.
I agree. I'm excited. Like you said, the combine's finally out of the way, and that's kind of the official kickoff to where people really start getting excited for the draft. And we'll be talking about individual prospects coming up. We'll be talking about moving up, moving back. I'm sure we'll touch on this again. I'm sure we'll talk about quarterbacks, offensive tackles, defensive ends. It's just an exciting time for a football fan who's really been kind of off for the last month and a half. But this is where it gets fun again.
I'm so intrigued with what they're going to do, because some things got to stay the same, but some things have got to be different. And I'm just curious to see how committed they are to truly changing kind of what they've always done, which is so hard to do for this organization in this city. It's always been that way. But sometimes you got to break free and try something else. Anything else for us today?
I'm good.
All right.
A smoothie to drink and some grilled fish to eat.
Grilled chicken tonight?
Yeah, then the grilled chicken and broccoli tonight.
Fantastic.
Man, I want that hamburger so bad.
All right. Well, stick to it. I'm going to hold you to it. All right, that'll do it for us. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.